The empty chair beside Clara Whitmore had become the loudest thing in the church hall. No one had marked it. No ribbon warned people away. Yet through 2 hours of the Alder Creek harvest supper, every man, woman, and child had understood that the chair was not to be taken. Clara sat at the far end of the long plank table, with her hands folded beneath it, hiding the places where her fingers had worried the skin beside her nails raw. Steam rose from bowls of venison stew. Fresh bread passed from hand to hand. Cider glowed amber in tin cups beneath the lamplight. None of it reached her. When the bread basket came down the table, Agnes Crowley lifted it across the empty chair and placed it beyond Clara's reach. The motion was small enough to be denied and deliberate enough to wound. Clara lowered her eyes to her plate. She had promised herself she would remain until Reverend Hale offered the closing prayer. Leaving early would be called proof of guilt. Staying would be called shamelessness. In Alder Creek, nearly everything she did had become evidence against her. A year earlier, she had sat near the front with Edmund beside her, checking figures for the church relief committee while he joked that numbers behaved better than people. Then 3 freight wagons loaded with flour, salt pork, and lamp oil had vanished from the winter stores. So had nearly $1,800 collected for miners' families. The town ledger bore Edmund Whitmore's signature. 3 days later, he disappeared. By the time they found his body beneath a snowslide on the North Road, Mayor Gideon Rusk had already told half the town that Edmund had fled with the relief money and died trying to escape through Black Pine Pass. No trial, no hearing, no question of whether the signature might be false. Only a grave without a church marker and a debt notice nailed to Clara's door. Across the hall, Sheriff Lyle Bannon laughed at something Mayor Rusk had said. His polished badge caught the lamplight. The mayor sat at the head table beneath the wooden cross, carving slices from a glazed ham as though generosity itself had taken human form. Clara looked away before either man noticed. Wind struck the church walls hard enough to rattle the windows. Someone near the stove said the first real snow would arrive before morning. Then the front doors opened. Cold air rolled through the room, flattening the candle flames and carrying in the smell of pine, horse, and distant snow. Conversation thinned, then stopped. A man stood in the doorway. Clara knew him by reputation before she knew his face. Boone Mercer came down from Black Pine Country only when he needed salt, cartridges, or a farrier. He guided surveyors through passes that killed less careful men. He trapped alone above the timberline, slept through storms in stone shelters, and had once carried an injured prospector 12 miles with a broken wrist of his own. At least, those were the stories. The man himself looked less like a story than a fact no one wished to argue with. Snow silvered the shoulders of his dark wool coat. His beard was trimmed poorly with a knife, and a pale scar crossed the edge of his jaw. A long hunting blade hung at his belt. Reverend Micah Hale cleared his throat. "Mr. Mercer, weapons stay outside during church gatherings." Boone looked at him, then removed the knife without complaint. He laid it on the bench by the door beside a row of children's mittens. The room seemed more unsettled by his obedience than it had been by the blade. Mayor Rusk raised one hand in welcome. "Mercer, you've come at a fortunate hour. There's food at the head table." Boone did not answer. His gaze moved slowly over the hall. The mine owners, the sheriff, the widows in their black collars, the freight men with cracked hands, the children being warned not to stare. Then he saw Clara, or perhaps he saw the empty chair. He crossed the floor. Each step seemed to make the silence more complete. Clara felt people turning without needing to look. She kept her hands beneath the table, but she could no longer keep them still. Boone stopped behind the empty chair. Agnes Crowley's spoon struck her plate. "Mr. Mercer," Clara said quietly, "there are places nearer the stove." "So I noticed." His voice was low, worn rough by cold air and disuse. He pulled the chair back. The scrape of its legs across the floor sounded indecently loud. Clara lifted her eyes. "You may not understand. I understand an empty chair." He sat beside her, not across from her, where he might have appeared to question her, not at the far corner, where he could claim accident. Beside her, shoulder to shoulder, in the place the whole town had kept vacant. Mayor Rusk's carving knife stopped halfway through the ham. Boone reached for the breadbasket. Agnes did not attempt to move it this time. He took one piece, set another on Clara's plate, and poured cider into the untouched cup beside her. "I came 4 days down from Black Pine," he said. Clara could feel every person in the hall listening. "For the supper?" she asked. "No." His eyes remained on the bread in his hands. "I came looking for a bookkeeper." A faint, ugly laugh escaped from somewhere near the head table. Sheriff Bannon silenced it with a glance. Clara's throat tightened. "The freight office dismissed me." "I know. Then you know no one in Alder Creek will hire me to total so much as a feed bill." Boone turned toward her. His eyes were dark gray, not cold as she had expected, but watchful. "I didn't ask who they'd hire." He spoke a little louder. "I asked who could tell when a ledger had been made to lie." The hall went still in a different way. Before, the silence had been contempt waiting for entertainment. Now it had edges. Clara glanced toward Mayor Rusk. His face had not changed, but his hand had closed around the handle of the carving knife. Sheriff Bannon leaned back in his chair. "Careful, Mercer," he called. "A man can wander so long in the mountains he starts mistaking old paper for truth." Boone broke his bread in half. "Paper doesn't lie by itself." Bannon's smile disappeared. Reverend Hale stepped forward. "This is a church supper. Whatever business you have can wait until morning." "That suits me." Boone ate as if the matter were settled. Clara tried to do the same, but the food had lost all taste. A year of grief had taught her that hope could be more dangerous than despair. Despair asked nothing. Hope could make a person rise, reach, and be struck down again. She bent toward Boone without looking at him. "What did you find?" "Not here." "Was it Edmund's?" His hand paused over his cup. That was answer enough. Clara's pulse beat hard at the base of her throat. Boone lowered his voice. "At first light, I'll come to your house. My house is watched. I know that too." She turned then. "By whom?" His gaze flicked once toward Sheriff Bannon. Clara felt the room tilt, though she remained seated. Boone placed both hands flat on the table. They were scarred, weather-split hands, but his manner was careful, almost formal. "Mrs. Whitmore, I found something in an old snow shelter above the North Freight Road. It was hidden where no storm would put it, and no honest man would leave it." She could barely breathe. "What kind of thing?" "A brass dispatch tube." Edmund had carried one for the relief committee. He had taken it with him the night he disappeared. Clara's spoon slipped from her fingers and struck the plate. Several heads turned. Boone shifted slightly, putting the width of his shoulder between her and the room. "Eat what you can," he said. "How can I eat after that?" "Because Bannon is watching, and frightened men pay close attention to anyone who looks as if they've learned something." Clara forced herself to lift the spoon. Across the hall, the sheriff was no longer pretending not to stare. For the remainder of the supper, Boone spoke only of weather. He described a windbreak near the eastern ridge, a creek already crusted with ice, and elk moving lower than usual. His words gave the room nothing useful. Clara answered when she could, though the brass dispatch tube seemed to sit between every thought. At last, Reverend Hale rose for prayer. The congregation bowed its head. Clara did not. Neither did Boone. She watched Mayor Rusk beneath the wooden cross, and for the first time in a year she saw not a pillar of Alder Creek, but a man who might have something to fear. When the prayer ended, Boone stood and pushed the empty chair back beneath the table. He did not offer Clara his arm. He did not speak to her as though she were fragile. He simply put on his coat, reclaimed his knife from beside the children's mittens, and waited by the door until she joined him. Outside, the first snow had begun. It fell in small, dry grains that whispered over the church steps. Lamps glowed along the muddy street. Horses stamped in the cold. Boone settled his hat low against the wind. "At first light," he said. Clara drew her shawl tighter. "Bring the tube." "I will. And Mr. Mercer?" He waited. "If this is some cruel mistake, I would rather know now." His face remained still, but something in his eyes softened. "It isn't a mistake." He looked past her toward the church windows, where shadowed figures had already gathered to watch them. "It may be the first honest thing Alder Creek has seen in a year." At dawn, Boone Mercer arrived at Clara's house carrying the brass dispatch tube beneath his coat. The snow had deepened during the night, sealing the yard in white and softening the outlines of the woodpile, fence posts, and wagon ruts. Clara had been awake since well before first light. She had swept the table twice, heated water she did not need, and placed Edmund's old magnifying glass beside the inkstand. Boone stamped the snow from his boots before entering. He did not bring his rifle inside. He leaned it beneath the porch roof, where he could reach it quickly, then followed Clara into the kitchen. The little house held the cold like a grudge. Clara fed another split log into the stove and watched Boone remove a narrow brass cylinder from inside his coat. It was scratched nearly colorless in places, with a dent near one end and a blackened seam where damp had worked under the cap. She knew it at once. Edmund carried that on every relief run. Boone set it on the table between them, found it wedged behind a loose stone in the old line shack above North Fork. Too high for spring water to leave it there, too deep for an animal. Clara touched the cylinder with 2 fingers. The metal was cold enough to sting. The cap resisted her. Boone took the tube, wrapped one hand around each end, and twisted carefully until the seal broke with a dry crack. Inside lay a roll of stained papers, a torn envelope, and a small red disc of sealing wax wrapped in cloth. Clara stopped breathing. The wax bore the pressed outline of a star above 2 crossed keys, the mark Sheriff Bannon used on county freight orders. Boone noticed her expression. "You know it?" "I copied it into the relief books every time the sheriff authorized a wagon after dark." She unrolled the papers one at a time. Water had blurred some entries into gray clouds, but the dates and freight numbers remained visible. 3 receipts recorded flour and lamp oil leaving the Alder Creek Relief Warehouse under Edmund's authority. Each destination was listed as North Fork Mine, a private concern owned through one of Gideon Rusk's companies. Clara read the figures twice, then a third time. This cannot be the whole record. Boone stood across from her, silent. She took Edmund's magnifying glass and bent over the first receipt. "The totals are correct. That is what makes them convincing. You see something else. Edmund always drew 2 lines beneath a final sum, one heavy, one light. He said a single line could be extended and altered. She turned the receipt toward Boone. Beneath the total was one straight stroke. "And this signature?" he asked. Clara traced the name without touching the ink. "The E is too narrow." Edmund's hand cramped after he broke 2 fingers at the freight yard. His first letter always leaned backward. She swallowed. This one was written by someone who knew his handwriting but not his hand. Boone's expression hardened, though his voice remained even. "Could you prove that to a marshal?" "Not from this alone." She opened the torn envelope. Half a letter remained inside, written in Edmund's familiar hand. "Clara, the North Fork entries were added after I closed the books. Rusk says I am mistaken. Bannon has ordered me not to speak to the committee until—" The paper ended in a ragged edge. Clara closed her eyes. For months she had dreamed of hearing Edmund deny the accusation. In those dreams his voice was clear, impatient, alive. Now she had 5 lines of ink and no final words. Boone moved nearer but did not touch her. What would the full proof look like, he asked. The question steadied her more than comfort might have. The original freight manifest, not these receipts. The warehouse kept a bound departure ledger with the driver's name, wagon number, destination, weight, and seal. Copies could be changed. The bound book could not be replaced without leaving a gap. Where is it? The old relief warehouse beyond the North Mill. I passed it coming in. Doors chained. After Edmund died, Mayor Rusk declared the building unsafe. Boone looked at the false receipts. Convenient. Clara gathered the papers into order. Her mind had begun working as it once had at the freight office, separating grief from sequence, fear from fact. There is another problem. A ledger proves where the wagons were ordered to go. It does not prove they arrived. Who drove them? She searched the blurred lines until one abbreviated name appeared twice. T. Lane. Toby? He was 16 then. He worked relief runs because his mother was ill. Clara looked toward the frosted window. He told the committee the wagons went into the river. Did you believe him? I believed he was terrified. A horse snorted outside. Boone's head turned before the next sound came. Slow hoofbeats entering the yard. He crossed to the side of the window and looked through a narrow place in the curtain. Bannon, he said. Clara rolled the papers quickly, pushed them back into the brass tube, and handed it to Boone. Stove. He shook his head. Too obvious. She pointed toward the flour bin. Boone buried the tube beneath the sack, then brushed the surface smooth just as someone struck the front door 3 times. Clara opened it. Sheriff Lyle Bannon stood on the porch in a dark coat, with a dusting of snow across the shoulders. Deputy Jonah Pike waited near the gate, holding the reins of both horses. Jonah did not meet Clara's eyes. "Morning, Mrs. Whitmore." Bannon removed one glove. "I hope I am not interrupting breakfast." "We have not eaten." His gaze moved past her and found Boone beside the table. "I see." Bannon stepped inside without being invited. He carried no visible papers, but his badge and revolver seemed to be documents enough. "I came regarding the Whitmore property," he said. "Mayor Rusk has reviewed the outstanding relief debt. Unless full payment is made by Friday, the house and acreage will be sold at public claim." Clara folded her arms. Edmund owed no relief debt. The town ledger says otherwise. The town ledger also says 3 wagons went missing under his hand. Bannon's mouth tightened. Clara continued before caution could reclaim her. "Tell me, Sheriff, why would your county seal appear on an order sending relief flour to North Fork Mine?" For one breath, nothing in his face moved. Then he smiled. "You have been reading things you do not understand. I understand seals, and grief makes patterns where none exist. Boone shifted his weight. The floorboard beneath him creaked. Bannon turned toward him. Mercer, the mayor is willing to overlook last night's disturbance if you trade your hides and leave Alder Creek by noon. I did not bring hides. No? I brought questions. The sheriff's hand settled near his holster. Mountain men have vanished for less than insolence. Clara stepped between them before Boone could answer. It surprised all three of them. Do not threaten a guest in my home. Bannon stared at her as if the furniture had spoken. Outside, Jonah Pike raised his head. Clara could hear her own pulse, but she did not move aside. The sheriff's expression changed first, not to fear, to calculation. You have until Friday, he said. After that, this house belongs to the town. And Mrs. Whitmore, if any county documents have been stolen or concealed, possession will be treated as confession. He replaced his glove and walked out. Jonah held the sheriff's stirrup while Bannon mounted. For a moment, the deputy glanced toward Clara's doorway. His face carried a warning he did not dare voice. Then both men rode away through the snow. Boone waited until the hoofbeats had faded. You showed him enough to frighten him. I know. He will move the ledger. Then we move first. Clara went to the flour bin and drew out the brass tube. Her hands were steady now. She placed the false receipts beside Edmund's unfinished letter and tapped Toby Lane's name with one finger. We find Toby before Bannon does, she said. Then we go to the warehouse. Boone studied her for a long moment. At the church supper, he had seen a woman endure a room determined to erase her. Now, in the cold morning light, he saw the part they had failed to extinguish. He nodded once. Tell me where the boy lives. Toby Lane was hiding in the loft above his uncle's livery when Clara and Boone found him. He crouched behind hay bales with a blanket around his shoulders and a bruise on one cheek. When Boone reached the ladder, Toby raised a pitchfork. Stay back. Clara climbed into view. Toby, it's me. His grip loosened. Sheriff says you stole county papers. The sheriff is afraid of what they show. At Edmund's name, Toby lowered the fork. I told the committee the wagons went into the river, he whispered. Bannon stood behind me, said my mother would lose the company doctor if I changed one word. Where did you take them? The old relief warehouse on the North Road. We unloaded after midnight. Mayor Rusk was there. Toby swallowed. Mr. Whitmore came and saw the county seal. He said the books had been altered. Bannon followed him outside. I heard a shot. Bannon came back alone. Clara closed her eyes only long enough to master herself. Is the departure ledger still there? Under the scale platform, Rusk said he'd burn everything when snow closed the road. Boone glanced through the loft window. Storm's coming fast. Then we go now, Clara said. Toby stared at her. He'll kill us. He may try, but I will not help him bury Edmund twice. They left by the rear alley and rode north beneath an iron sky. Boone kept them in a fir-screened creek bed until the warehouse appeared beyond the mill, its front doors chained. Inside, dust and old grain filled the air. Toby led them to crates hidden beneath tarps. Boone pulled one covering aside. Flour, salt pork, lamp oil. Every sack bore the relief committee's blue stamp. Clara thought of hungry families and children with rags around their boots. Rusk had hidden charity until winter made it valuable. Toby pried up a plank beside the freight scale. Beneath it lay a cloth-wrapped book. Clara opened to the missing dates. Edmund's original entries assigned 3 wagons to North Fork Mine under Bannon's seal, with Toby named as driver. Beneath each total were Edmund's 2 familiar lines. Proof, A board creaked behind them. The side door opened, and Bannon entered with 2 armed men. "I hoped you'd find the book for me," he said. Boone moved in front of Clara. "Toby, down." The first shot struck Boone high in the shoulder. He staggered but shoved Clara behind the scale as another bullet tore through a grain chute. Bannon's men withdrew and slammed the door. A chain rattled outside. Then Clara smelled kerosene. Flame climbed the rear wall. Smoke rolled beneath the rafters. Boone fired at the lock, but the old iron held. Toby began to cough. Clara looked up. A cargo pulley crossed the ceiling, its counterweight made from stacked iron scale plates. "Boone, cut the counterweight rope. It'll tear down the roof brace. That is the idea." While Boone sawed with his good hand, Clara climbed onto the scale platform and looped the cargo line around the brace nearest the loading bay. Now, the rope parted. The iron plates dropped. The pulley snapped taut, wrenching the brace sideways. Boards and shingles tore free, and snow poured through the opening as part of the loading wall folded outward. "Toby, go!" A burning beam crashed between him and the breach. Clara caught it with the cargo hook and threw her weight onto the rope. The pulley lifted at inches. "Crawl!" Toby slid beneath. Boone had fallen to one knee, blood darkening his coat. Clara pushed the ledger inside her bodice, caught him beneath his good arm, and pulled him toward the opening. Outside, a bullet struck the broken wall. Toby hurled a loose lantern into Bannon's wagon. The horses reared, tore free, and scattered the gunmen. Clara and Boone fell into the snow as the warehouse roof collapsed behind them. Toby ran back. Together, he and Clara dragged Boone into the creek bed. "Can you reach the telegraph station?" Clara asked. Toby looked toward town. "Send one line to Deputy U.S. Marshal Nathaniel Cole in Helena. Say the Alder Creek relief theft is proved. Name Rusk and Bannon, then leave before they cut the wire." Toby nodded and mounted Boone's horse. Clara watched him disappear through the trees, then turned to Boone. His face had gone gray. "The driver's shelter," he said. 2 miles up Black Pine Trail. Can you walk?" "With help." Clara drew his arm across her shoulders. Behind them, the warehouse roared. Ahead, snow erased the trail almost as quickly as it formed. She carried Edmund's ledger against her heart and guided Boone into the storm. By the time Clara reached the driver's shelter, Boone could no longer stand without her. She lowered him beside the stove, cut away his coat, and found the bullet had passed through the flesh above his shoulder blade. Clara boiled water, packed the wound, and kept Boone awake while the storm battered the shutters. Near midnight, his fever eased. "You should take the ledger and ride south," he murmured. "No. Bannon survives because towns prefer comfort to truth." Clara tightened the bandage. "Then Alder Creek will have to be made uncomfortable." At dawn, Toby arrived on a lathered horse. He had sent the wire. Mayor Rusk had called a church meeting to seize Clara's property and declare Boone her murderer. Clara stood. "Good. He gathered everyone for us." They returned by the old timber road. Boone rode pale, one arm bound to his chest. Toby carried the dispatch tube. Clara kept Edmund's ledger beneath her coat. Inside the church, Rusk stood beneath the cross, blaming lawless men for the warehouse fire. The doors opened. Snow blew around Clara as she entered. No one whispered. She laid the blackened ledger on the long table. "These are Edmund Whitmore's original entries. The wagons went to North Fork Mine under Sheriff Bannon's seal. The relief food was hidden there to be sold back to you after winter raised the price." Toby stepped forward and named the wagons, the midnight unloading, and the shot he heard after Edmund confronted Bannon. Rusk ordered Deputy Jonah Pike to arrest them. Jonah examined the seal, removed his badge, and set it beside the ledger. "No," Bannon drew. Boone struck his wrist before the revolver cleared leather. The gun skidded away. He forced Bannon to his knees, his good hand closing around the sheriff's throat. "Boone," Clara said. He looked at her. "Let him live to hear the truth entered into a lawful record." Boone released him. Hooves thundered outside. Deputy U.S. Marshal Nathaniel Cole entered with 4 officers and Toby's telegraph message. By noon, Bannon and Rusk were in irons. Searchers recovered the remaining supplies from North Fork Mine. Weeks later, Edmund's name was cleared before the congregation that had condemned him. Clara accepted the judgment, but not the baskets and apologies left at her door. Some wounds required more than shame to close. The territorial court returned her property and awarded compensation from Rusk's seized holdings. Clara sold the house. By the next autumn, a way station stood near Black Pine Pass. Travelers found stew, blankets, honest accounts, and Boone guiding them through dangerous country. Clara managed the stores and winter relief books, every total marked with 2 lines. One evening, a young woman in torn clothes paused in the doorway, afraid to approach the crowded table. Clara pulled out the chair beside her. Then Boone entered under a mantle of snow. "Any room left for a mountain man?" Clara glanced at the chair he had built for himself, then at the stranger slowly sitting beside her. "At this table," she said, "no one eats alone."